Welcome to the second session of the Chamber's Fall Webinar Series. My name is Ann Knutson, and I'm the HR Director of Bank 59. I've also been a member of the Chamber's Board of Directors for 6 years. I served as your president in 2018 and 19, and I'm currently serving as past president and director of the Business Education Committee. I'd also like to introduce another board member, Kevin Brendel. Kevin is the owner of a full-service technology company called Brew City PC. He's been the technological guru in helping the Business Education Committee bring all of these webinars to you. Kevin, thank you so much for your tremendous support. The Business Education Committee has focused our fall webinar series on issues employers have had and continue to face as employees deal with so many different concerns, including workplace concerns, family obligations, and other pandemic-related matters. We're pleased to have someone from the Glacial Community YMCA to talk about how to respond to conflict in this changing world. Jessica Mealing is the Branch Executive Director for the Glacial Community YMCA, Paps Farm Branch. She's been with the Y for 15 years and has been a trainer for several Ys in southeastern Wisconsin, as well as the YMCA of the USA, facilitating many different meetings surrounding communication, diversity, and servant leadership. She loves being a part of the Y as it allows her to serve the community in multiple ways for multiple ages of individuals and families. Please join me in welcoming Jessica. Jessica, thank you so much for taking the time today to be with the Oconomowoc businesses this morning.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. So thank you for the introduction. We definitely at the Y have faced a lot of these issues that obviously we've been talking about shortly and how these education systems are focused on. And I just want to share with you, the seminar is really focused on a training that we built around grace-filled service and just how to address that conflict, because we knew as we reopened after the pandemic, after the closure, that we would be dealing with some intensified conflict. So if you give me just a moment, I'm going to share my screen with you. And hopefully this works. All right, please let me know if you can't see it, but we should be up right now. So again, the title, Responding to Conflict, Helping Your Employees and Customers Navigate Conflicts in a Changed World. And we really asked as the why, how did we get here? How did we need to create, or why did we need to create this training? And it really came down to intensified conflict. I know everyone really has, in business, we've dealt with conflict constantly. That's kind of what we do. We all have unsatisfied customers or people who have questions. But the pandemic really intensified it, and it came down to a loss of control for people, right? So you can't just go about your daily business. You have to wear a mask, or you don't have to wear a mask, or you're allowed to go certain places. You're not allowed to go certain places. Your children are at home. You're still trying to work. And it just completely intensified everything. Stress levels, conflict, that loss of control. And we just needed to be prepared for that as a staff team. And so our CEO asked, we need to be graceful in how we deal with these people, knowing conflict will be intensified. So how could we do that? We just looked at overall, again, throughout this PowerPoint, I kind of jump all over, so please bear with me. But again, people are dealing with isolation, frustration, insecurity, fear, right? Fear is another huge part of it that I think was driving a lot of people, especially in the beginning. And now as Wisconsin specifically is seeing those increased cases at the Y, we are seeing more and more conflict, again, re-entering kind of our place of business. So we knew that how we help them navigate that reentry into a changed world was really important. We could, make their day worse or make their day better, but we really wanted to focus on how we could serve people better. And so that's really how this training was birthed and how it came out. And it's worked really well for us. I'll share some examples a little bit later. And it's somewhat interactive because I'll be asking for examples if others are able to share or have any. So what is grace-filled service? Just some definitions. Grace is courteous goodwill. Being filled is becoming an overwhelming presence in. Service is the action of helping. So we need to be an overwhelming presence of courteous goodwill while helping others. And that is a grace-filled service. So how are we focusing on them and less on us and where they are and meeting their needs, those types of things. We need to help them process through their emotions as they continue to move beyond the world. So whether it's after the recent stay-at-home orders or the mask mandate, all of those things, I'm sure there will be new things coming out over the coming months throughout the winter. We just need to be prepared to help them navigate those emotions. I thought this was really cute because I think a lot of times we think of our customers as having tantrums sometimes, and we can focus on that as one thing, but really we need to take a lesson from toddlers. So if you really want to learn about grace, take notes from a toddler. I have several of them. They witness our impatience, our frustration, and our moodiness, yet they forgive us, no questions asked. They see us at our absolute worst, and yet we're still their favorite humans in the entire world. And so for us, I think we really need to focus on that piece of it. And that is what we have asked our staff to do. It's worked really well, is we know people are going to yell at us. We know there's the possibility that we're going to feel like punching bags at some times, but really we just need to meet people where they are, meet their frustrations, meet their emotions, and help them move past it in a forgiving way, in a way that allows them that space to work through those emotions and then help them move beyond it. So the types of conflict that we have most been dealing with at the Y specifically, since dealing with the pandemic, is conflict with self. An example of that is I should have stayed home. We had people coming in that are extremely frustrated more with themselves. They finally wanted to get out. They maybe came and saw people, especially in the beginning, not wearing masks, and they felt we should have mandated it. They want to get out there, but they're just so nervous and fearful about it that they're kind of beating themselves up about it. The next is conflict with environment. So we've seen both sides of this. These guidelines are too loose or these guidelines are too stringent. I know many of you, obviously, we're kind of businesses across the board in terms of types of customers that you're serving. And maybe I know some of the banks have just opened their lobbies or not opened their lobbies yet. So you might be seeing like, I don't want to come in there, or I do want to come in there and you're not open yet. So we were seeing both of those as well. Like, I can't believe you're making us walk on the right side of the hallway. I should be able to go wherever I want. And then other people, saying we should only be using one hallway. So we saw both of those as we reopened. And then conflict with others. So he or she should be wearing a mask or stop overreacting. That unfortunately is the one that we are seeing a lot more frequently at the Y now that the second mask mandate went into effect. We started seeing that a lot more. And then as COVID cases in the state began to increase, people are getting more heightened. They're getting more fearful. They're getting more emotional about it. It becomes very personal at this point. And so we're starting to see more of that, not just with people approaching our staff about it, but members talking to each other about it. And so how can we help them navigate both spectrums, serve both sides of that spectrum and the members that we're dealing with, and yet continuing to be safe? So how are we responding lovingly and to these conflicts confidently? You want to be confident when you're handling these. So this is the part where I would love to hear about your experiences, if possible. I probably should have asked beforehand if that's something we can do in terms of unmuting people. But what I would like to hear is, what are some experiences that you have had personally? So what was the situation? How did an employee, a staff person, or maybe you were at the grocery store and it was another person walking down the aisle, how did they respond or behave with you, and how did it make you feel? All right. So whether people are trying to share and they can't, or if no one's ready to share, we will go from there. I can share a couple personally that I have seen in case it's someone trying to share and they're just unable to. But I have been in a situation at a grocery store where at the time it was at the very beginning, I chose not to wear a mask, and I had a woman confront me in the grocery store about not wearing a mask. An employee did come along to address it, and at the same time, you could tell they were unconfident. And so it didn't help the situation. I just kind of had to walk away. I was not going to confront or argue with someone at the time. However, I know that person, the other woman, felt very frustrated. I felt kind of attacked, and I know that the employee felt completely helpless in that situation. So just again, the emotions revolving around it, all three people involved, it wasn't good. One of our staff at the Y, his wife was at a grocery store, had a big cart full. It was, again, at the beginning when people were trying to space out and make sure everyone was a lot better, I think, at social distancing, maybe in the beginning. She had over the allotted amount for the express lane, but there were some long lines. The staff person did not want to keep people in long lines. And so she kind of waved her over to that express lane and started checking her out. Some other people lined up behind her and started getting really frustrated that she was in the express lane with too many groceries. Also, the people behind her en masse, they were getting frustrated. The staff person was just trying to help her by calling her over. And yet she started to feel very anxious, the person that was waiting in line. She had been called over. She was happy to be getting through there faster and not having to be crowded around people. But again, the people behind her started pressuring her and making her feel like she shouldn't be there. Again, she was wearing a mask, and that made her feel very uncomfortable. The people behind her weren't. And so it was just another situation where emotions, frustrations were high. It was a situation in any pre-COVID world, which probably wouldn't have been a big deal. No one would have thought about it. Like, she called her over, she's going through the line. But because you add the factor of masks, you add the factor of people trying to be spaced out, being frustrated, wanting to get out of there, it just really heightened and made that situation worse. So that would be another example of something that happened. So when you're dealing with conflict, the real thing that we talk to our staff about, and I would share with you, is just mentally preparing yourself to handle it. We all know it's going to come. In the beginning, for me, as we reopened the Y, I felt like I was probably handling 2 or 3 major situations every day. And it was really stressful. It was really wearing on me emotionally. And it really just came to regrounding myself and making sure I was mentally prepared and just knowing it's going to happen. And you just move through it. And that really helped a lot to kind of relieve the stress. It was more about focusing less on what I was doing and just focusing on the other person and the conflict at hand. So when you're mentally preparing yourself, make sure that you're adopting the viewpoint that it is a privilege to help customers navigate through this inevitable conflict. I don't think we always look at it that way, but it really is just adopting the viewpoint that I want to help this person. They're frustrated, they're emotional, they might be afraid. This is probably the 3rd issue they've had today, 5th issue they've had today, whatever it is. I am going to do my best to help them get through this. Sometimes you have to set your personal beliefs aside around the conflict and take the emotion out of it. So we have staff that everyone absolutely should wear masks. We also have staff that say no one should have to wear masks if they don't want to. They are going to be dealing with customers and members on both sides of that spectrum. And they need to be able to take their personal beliefs out of it. If you don't believe in wearing masks and a person in front of you absolutely does, their belief still matters, their emotions still matter. And you need to make sure that you can take your own personal beliefs and emotion out of that to help them address the need that they have. And then remember that the conflict is likely about a loss of control. We have a lot of people coming in and yelling at our staff, literally yelling at our staff. And it's not, we kind of reiterate with them, it's not about you. They're not yelling at you. They are more frustrated with the situation, that they feel like they're being forced into something that maybe they don't want to do, or they're unable to see people that they really want to see. And this is an area typically when the conflict is coming that they feel they can regain some control. And so we just need to remember that it's not about us. It's about kind of them and where they are at. The best example I probably have of this is within the first week of reopening the Y in May. We had a woman who was really frustrated with the fact that we had some restrictions in place and some guidelines, and certain areas of the Y just were not open because we did not feel they were safe. And so she had left scathing voicemails for me, for our CEO, and for our membership director. She also left me a very scathing email as well, and asked me to pass that on to our leadership team, just about, she felt we were not taking it seriously, and that we should be helping people get over this fear that they have, and we should be completely open. Before we could even return her call, she came into the Y. And as she was leaving, I asked her, she was screaming at the desk. I asked her to walk outside. We did. She yelled and got her emotions out for about 5 minutes. It was pretty loud, loud enough that one of my staff noticed it and actually called another leadership staff to come out and potentially help with the situation. By the time he got out there, it was unneeded. And what really it came down to is, after 5 minutes of her getting all of that out, I let her get it out and then just said, I don't think you're mad at me. I don't think you're mad at the Y. I think you're frustrated that you've been isolated for 3 months. You're frustrated that you think the government's overstepping. You're frustrated in that you don't feel this is an issue where other people do. And you've not been able to see your family. And I think all those things are frustrating you, and that's okay. We can have this conversation now. And at that moment, she broke down into tears. And that was, for me, that was one of the best conversations I've ever had working in the Y. It sounds kind of crazy because it started out with her yelling at me pretty intensely. But that was what she needed. She needed someone to acknowledge, this is a loss of control on your part. We understand it. You're frustrated with what's going on all around. It's not just us. It's society, it's your family. It's not being able to do things you want to do. And she just broke down and cried. We hugged for a long time. We had a great conversation for 45 minutes, and she felt a lot better for it. Our businesses are all very different, so we're all going to have to help people out in a much different way. For us at the Y, that's kind of what we like to do. It's not just about working out and getting exercise. It's really about helping people wherever they are with whatever they needed. And at that moment, she just needed to get some frustrations out, and she needed a hug to feel that connection. So just keeping in mind, I was mentally prepared to have that conversation, and that's why this worked so well. I was able to stay calm. I was able to not be offended by it. And that is what we have really asked our staff to do as well. So again, be the exception in a frustrating experience, or at least try, do the best that you can. Another big one that we like to talk about is making sure that you're reading body language and then reading those cues. So what are the facial expressions people are having? I see a guy 3 people back in a line and he is really frustrated. He has an angry face. I know when he's coming up, he's going to be really frustrated, and maybe let the staff have it. So just making sure that we're watching for those things ahead of time. What is their posture? Are they relaxed? Are they fearful? Do they have crossed arms? All of those are things that you can look for as cues when you're mentally preparing yourself to handle a potentially conflict situation. And then movements as well. I'm sure some of you have experienced this in the grocery store. Some people are totally fine. It's like a normal thing, but every once in a while you'll walk by a person who completely hugs the side because they're terrified that you might be getting too close to them. Is someone moving like that? Are they constantly stepping away from someone stepping towards them? Those are all things to look for and watch for. Again, looks of discomfort, whether it has to do with facial expressions or movements. There are people who look really uncomfortable. And then group size as well. Are there a bunch of people standing in a group and don't seem to mind, or has there someone completely separated themselves from that? But watching how people are interacting with those around them is another big cue and a way to mentally prepare for a conversation you might have to have. So some of the assistance strategies that we've kind of walked through with our staff as well is, the first and foremost, we just review them, watch the cues to determine your approach. It could be very open, it could be very cordial, or you might just need to be prepared to let someone let their emotions out for a little bit. So determine how you're going to approach the situation, hopefully before you get there. And then take people to an open, private space if possible. Again, this is really big in this day and age, just to be a more open space. A lot of people are uncomfortable with those smaller offices or those smaller rooms that maybe we've previously had these conversations in, but it still needs to be private if possible. Ask people to share their thoughts and frustrations. And when doing so, ask open-ended questions of them, not just simple yes and no's. You want to make sure that you're giving them that space to air their frustrations and see what they say. A lot of times what they're saying will help you understand. It might not be exactly what they're talking about. Like the example I gave earlier, she shared her frustrations, and through her, 5 minutes of going on about what her frustrations were, that's why I felt comfortable saying, this is not about the why. This is not about what's happening here. It's more about, something personal going on. But because I allowed her that space to kind of share that, I could get to the bottom of kind of where she was coming from. So just give people that time that they need. Provide options. So, you might not be comfortable doing this, but what about this? Some examples that we give at the Y for our staff is group exercise. We maybe have people that are not comfortable coming in the building, but they really want to take a group exercise class. So we have outdoor opportunities. We have virtual opportunities. Does your business have some ways to provide options for people to help them feel a little bit more comfortable to get done what they still want to get done? It's just one way that we can help people kind of navigate where they are personally when dealing with this pandemic. Always explain the why. So that's a big one. First and foremost, we care about people. We've implemented precautions based on local restrictions, guidelines, physical distancing, all those things. This is why we are doing something or why we are not doing something. That helps people see the other side of things. It's a way to help them and encourage them to feel empathy, which is really one of the major things we focus on is showing empathy and encouraging empathy. So I understand exactly where you're coming from, right? Taking the time to really do that. I always feel at this point, staff have done a really good job with sharing kind of where they are when people are frustrated and they're stressed out, and I've been working at home and my kids have been home, and it's really hard to do virtual learning while I'm working at home. I understand. I have kids too. I've been working at home. Let me help you walk through this. And let me help you understand where this other person is coming from. And that has really helped a lot too. So helping people understand their own feelings and frustrations, that you understand the perspective, and then trying to help them see other people's frustrations and areas as well. Fears and barriers. This is another space where we ask people to share. And maybe what we'll do is I'll just kind of read it out and you can think about it if it comes up in the Q&A. But just understanding that conflict can be uncomfortable. I don't think anyone really enjoys conflict or handling conflict. And I'm sure a lot of people have fears and maybe think there are barriers to serving others in this way. Maybe you've witnessed them, maybe you have experienced some yourself. But again, it will help a lot if you mentally prepare yourself and then just use and identify some strategies for yourself on how best to do it, and then apply them consistently. The more you do it, the more you practice it, the more consistent that you are, the easier it becomes. Again, not that a person would go out seeking that conflict, but when you're prepared, you're definitely better able to handle that conflict when it does come out. Some other things that we provided our staff for, and I'd love to provide for you, are just some things that you can say. So people, as they've been dealing with this, you've heard the new normal, and a lot of people are like, it's not the new normal. I just want the old normal back. And a lot of that is some of these things that we can say. So for right now, these are the guidelines we have, or at this time, these are some precautions that we're taking. Things can change in the future. We always let people know we at the Y are watching what's happening. We're watching governor's orders. We're watching new studies. We're watching the CDC. Things can change. We adjust as we learn more about this virus, as we learn more about potentially how it's spread or its infectious rates or days or times, any of those things. These things can change, but for right now or at this time, this is how we're choosing to operate. In all of these things, be honest, be gentle, be firm. You can't be waffly. You have to know what the policies are, and you have to have kind of some words and be prepared for how they need to be enforced and why they need to be enforced. And then be honest with your customers. This is why we're doing this. Again, always going back to empathy and trying to help them understand. I've had a lot of conversations. One last night we had an exposure, someone come back positive in a group exercise class. And so we had to reach out to all those people who were in that group exercise class to ask them to refrain from using the Y for 2 weeks, just to make sure that they were over a potentially infectious period. And I had one person who was really upset about it, wanted to come back. And I just explained to her, like, this is for the safety of others. It's for the safety of you. We would love for you to monitor symptoms. She totally understood by the end of our conversation where we were coming from and why we had those specific policies and why we had to be consistent. And at the end, I think she was still frustrated, but her comment was, I understand your position. I understand where you're coming from. I'm still frustrated, but I will totally respect it and I get it. And it ended up, starting off an extremely angry conversation at the beginning, to sharing kind of what we had to do and showing that empathy to a point that helped her understand it so that we could end in a very good way. And she's excited to come back at the end of it, whereas at the beginning she was looking to cancel her membership. So it really is just helping people understand both sides of it, where they're coming from and why you're doing certain things or not. And then in all scenarios, be calm. I think all of us know in working with customers, if we're heightened, if our staff's emotions are heightened, that's not going to help anything. So just remembering to stay calm, be kind. Something I've heard throughout my years in work is, would you rather be remembered for being right, or would you rather be remembered for being kind? And so just making sure when people are leaving, they feel that you're kind, they feel that your staff is kind, and that you're doing the best you can. And then being empathetic and being sincere. People know when they're being read a script. They know when they're just being given talking points. And while we all need talking points at this time, obviously throughout this pandemic, it's huge. We need to know what we're talking about. We still need to make sure that we're giving those in a very sincere and empathetic way. So people understand it. We're not just doing this because we have to, we're doing this because we should, and we have reasons behind it for doing it. So that's a big piece of it in those scenarios as well. At that point, those are all the strategies. I'd be fine to review any of them with you if anyone would like to review back. But at that point, Anne or Sherry, I'll leave it over to you if we want to open to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I think you offered some really good suggestions and strategies for the group. And as I was listening through the presentation, there are a number of things that occurred to me. And I wanted to share some thoughts, if you don't mind as well, based on some of the trainings and sessions that I deliver for a variety of individuals, whether they work for an employer or for it's their own management of personal conflicts. So are you okay if I share a couple of those thoughts and maybe we can work through that together?
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Well, there's a couple of things that occurred to me as you were talking through the presentation. And number one is around diffusing someone who's angry and someone who is upset, and how do you work through that? And I think you did an awesome job of really explaining, number one, sometimes it really is about just letting that person get their emotions out. And I think though, the location in which that's occurring is really important to know ahead of time. So if you're in an employer and there's always a possibility, right, of conflict, and that's having a strategy in advance of where do we need to have these difficult conversations. So if someone is just initially reacting or responding to a situation, but if it continues to go on to say, it might make sense at this point if we step into my office, or in your case, let's go outside, let's talk a little bit more through that, because the last thing we want to do is start unnerving the people who are around us. Other customers are seeing what's going on. People start pulling out their phones and they're taping. It's like, oh my gosh, this is getting out of control. So we don't want to have that happen. So I think what you mentioned, number one, just letting them vent. One of the strategies that I've used, and sometimes people will do this when they're really anxious and upset, is they'll start repeating themselves over and over and over again. And so a strategy I really encourage is to repeat back what you've heard I've heard that you say that you're really upset. You've been approached and asked to put your mask on. You've indicated that you have a medical condition that does not allow you to wear a mask. Is that the heart of the issue? Are there more things we need to discuss? And so at that point, hopefully that person will either say, well, yes, there's a couple more, then you repeat those things, or no, that's really it. And then it's okay, let's talk about what the issue is. From there, I talk about conflict in terms of a framework of how we deal with conflict, and whether it's from an employer perspective or it's even dealing with personal conflict. And I use the framework, keeping it pretty simple, called the ABC approach. And ABC is accurate, brief, and clear. So whether, again, it's someone that you're dealing with, a customer, or even on a personal level when you're dealing with conflict, number one, starting out with that accuracy and really staying focused on the point of it. What is it that we're talking about? And maybe it's the whole mask situation in the workplace. Maybe it's someone who is in a leadership role and is having difficulty with an employee on a performance issue. So sticking to those facts as much as you possibly can and not pulling in all other issues and things that have come up. So staying accurate. The other A that I'd like to add to that word is approach. And I think this is particularly important anytime you're having to hold a difficult conversation. Now, if you're coming at someone and you're responding, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you just, settle down, lady, settle down. How many times does that settle someone down? Rarely, ever. In fact, it probably fuels the fire versus you're keeping your arms open, you're taking a step back, you're nodding your head, you're listening. So it's all in the approach as well. So that's the A I want people to take away: accurate and approach. The B part of it is being brief. So the last thing that we want to do is to go into this full-on explanation. You mentioned that explaining the why is important, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think the other part of it, though, is just staying narrowly focused on the topic on hand. If we go into, well, the policies at the bank suggest that you need to do this, and if I pull out my handbook, it goes on and on and on, people don't want to listen to that. We want to stay really brief. And then the last piece, and I think you mentioned as well, is also about being really clear and concise. So what is the issue? We're going to be brief about it. We're going to be clear. And here's the biggest thing. So it goes A, B, C, and then L. And L is huge. A, B, C is really little. The L is giant, and L stands for listening. So then at this point, once we deliver the message, we step back and we listen. And again, it's about repeating back what you've heard to acknowledge, and then managing through how now do we need to address this situation. Now I've listened, I've shared my concerns, I've listened back, and hopefully we can come to some agreement on how to handle. Now, there's always going to be those situations, and Jessica, maybe you can speak to this, where someone is just simply out of control. We're going to run into that. And again, you pointed that out earlier. You've got to plan for these things far in advance of when they happen. Let's talk through the common scenarios, but let's talk about the one customer or the one employee who just loses it. How do you manage that, Jessica? What would you recommend?
I think a lot of it, it kind of goes back to the same strategies. So even, pre-pandemic, we didn't have to think about it as much. We just kind of moved through it. But giving people a choice of control. So I had a recent situation as well where we had had several conversations with this young girl about her inappropriate dress, I would say, in the wellness area. We had it repeatedly with her over the last 3 weeks. And so I had to go up and ask her, I either need you to change your clothes into something more appropriate and finish your workout, or I need you to leave. And so she said, I'll just leave. She was very calm about it, wasn't frustrated at all. And as I walked across the floor to get back to my office, I saw, peripheral vision, someone running at me from the other side of the fitness floor. And I realized as I turned, it was her father. And so he started yelling in the middle of the fitness floor with a lot of people surrounding us, how we were singling out his daughter. And he felt very frustrated by it. And, this isn't just you, it's about all your staff. And so just really being prepared to say, you know what, can we go downstairs and talk about this? Let's have the conversation right now. And so, I mean, he calmed down. We took it away into another place. We had chatted about that kind of off the floor, because you are kind of riling up everyone else that is around you. And then similarly, just having that conversation with them, getting into a place where you can sit down, have the conversation. He was angry again for probably half that conversation, but remaining calm, keeping the emotions out of it, and explaining. I think a lot of times people too are looking for inconsistencies in your answers. Because if you're inconsistent, they will be able to kind of tear that argument down. Well, you've made this argument, she needs to change her clothes, but there are also men that are not wearing clothes, and you guys are not addressing it there. And I think kind of similar, to reflect back on what you had said earlier, was you need to stay on point. We're not talking about these men over here or these other women who are not potentially dressing appropriately either. Yes, our staff should address those. However, let's talk about the situation at hand, which is why you're frustrated that I have asked your daughter to leave. And just having, again, staying on point, bringing it back, like, we will address those situations as a staff team, but we're really talking about this, and helping them to go that route and help them calm down and focus on what we were talking about at the hand. At the end, it turned out really well. But again, I say be honest, but be gentle. A lot of that situation revolved around, well, I think she should be able to wear whatever she wants and be confident, and explaining very succinctly, like, we're the type of organization, we need you to wear something else. We need you to understand where we're coming from, why, explaining it in a way that was a bit more empathetic and helped her understand the other side of things. Like, there are people coming in with young adolescent boys who were trying to teach to respect women and what they're doing. And when you shed it in that light, it was an aha for her. And we haven't had to deal with the situation since. So by focusing on it, all the points you said were perfect. We're focusing on this. We're not going to digress into something else. We're being consistent with what we're saying. And I'm helping you see where we're coming from. That helped a lot. We've also had, I've had situations, a phone call actually, where, again, a woman starts off screaming on why we're not doing this, that, or the other thing when it comes to masking or enforcing different rules that she felt should be in place. And explaining to her, it's not just about masks. We have 4 different mitigation strategies. It was the only time while I was explaining those 4 different strategies to her that she was quiet, because she had interrupted me the whole time. I couldn't get a word in as edgewise on the phone. And at the end of it, she said, I disagree, but I understand where you're coming from now. And so I still disagree, but I appreciate that you explained that and that you took the time. So a lot of it is just, again, working through it. You're not going to be able to appease everyone. You're just not. Some people are not going to agree with you. They're not going to understand where you're coming from, and that's okay. But doing your best, remaining calm, understanding there's an emotional piece of it for everyone. And that sometimes you have to be okay walking away. Yeah. It is, when I have used those approaches and those strategies, it's rare that people don't calm down and walk away. I think only once in my career have I ever had to just ask someone to leave because they wouldn't. But I would also say people need to be okay with that as well. There are some times, whether you're protecting those around you or your staff, that you just have to ask people to leave and maybe come back when they're more calm.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. And I think there's been a huge escalation of where people have gone from just being angry to bottom line abusive. I mean, and so one of the things that I like to emphasize with those that I work with is, again, being prepared for those things. So preparation is key in about everything we do in our lives, right? Yep. And if we don't prepare for a variety of scenarios, we're going to be caught off guard and likely not make some good decisions at that point. And so one of the things that I strongly encourage leadership to do with their employees is talk about the difference between someone who's angry versus someone who's abusive. And let's make that distinction right now. And how do we handle this person who is angry? And then how are we going to handle the person who is abusive? And one of the things that I encourage in an abusive situation, again, is not to go, sir, you need to calm down, like relax, or I'm going to call the police. You're just pouring fuel on the fire, right? It's just going to make the situation worse. And I always recommend using I words. I'm getting uncomfortable with where this conversation is going. I think I need a little bit more time to think through some of the things that we've talked about, and it would probably be better for you to leave at this juncture, and let's talk about a time when we can reconvene. And if you don't have your schedule right now, call me and we will walk through that. But I'm just not in a good position to be able to address this right now. It's very difficult for someone then to say, we're going to continue on, because if you say, you're not in a good place right now, sir, or you need to control your emotions. Again, people at that point have lost it. And what I call that too is emotional hijacking.
Yes.
So I'm working through a variety of courses related to emotional intelligence, and we definitely don't have time to get into that piece right now. But one of the things that's very, very clear to me as I've gone through these classes and even teach a class on emotional intelligence is that our emotions will overtake all of our rational thinking mechanisms. And so we have to, again, prepare and plan in advance. If a conversation is getting emotional, how am I going to respond to that? The key piece is that we need to understand we can never control the emotions of someone else. We can certainly create an environment where someone feels safe to share what they're sharing. They feel listened to. They feel that it's an open discussion. But in the end, they're going to control their own emotions. But what we can do is control our own emotions. And oftentimes that even comes with simple strategies like just breathing through. Even though I've dealt with many situations involving borderline, if not abusive types of conflict, if I can take on some of these strategies so physiologically, what are the things that I'm doing? Number one, I'm taking long, slow, deep breaths. Now I'm not making it obvious in front of the other person, but at the same token, I'm breathing in, I'm holding it, and I'm breathing out. So if I can control that physiological response, I can also ensure then that emotional hijacking isn't taking place, that I can move back to my place of rational thinking. And just by even thinking through to go, oh my gosh, you're getting so nervous, Anne, you're getting so worked up over this. Just by telling myself that to go, okay, my emotions are creeping in. I need to find a way. So whatever that strategy is for each of us. And it's okay. And I tell people this to say, it's okay to tell someone, I'm a little nervous talking about this right now, or, I feel a little anxious, or whatever the situation might be, because sometimes once we share what our feelings are, instead of trying to hide them, it becomes that much easier to have a discussion, a difficult conversation, because you've got that out of the way. Instead of trying to hide these things, I've been able to get that out of the way. You probably don't want to do that with a customer. I'm a little nervous talking to you about this, but maybe it's someone who's in leadership, or someone, it's a coworker that you're dealing with. This is really hard for me to do, but I think it's important that we get into this. And then using that ABC approach, and then stopping in the giant L is listening. So controlling those emotions. How do you feel about that, Jessica?
I think that's the most important piece in all of this for me. And that's what I've noticed with staff too, and just helping them understand and navigate through that. A way that I like to think about that is you have to keep remembering this is not about me. Whatever is happening, whatever the conflict is, it is not about you. It is where that person is personally, and their personal frustrations, their emotions revolving the situation or around the situation. You just happen to be the person that is there dealing with it. And if it wasn't you, it would be someone else in your organization, and it would be the same conversation. So it's not about you. And you just have to keep remembering that as well. It is hard. Mental hijacking is real. Absolutely. If you allow it to be. So you had explained, like with the strategies, the breathing, for me, the mental is, this is not about me. I just need to take myself out of it and stay rational and help them understand the other side. And it's not just my side, right? When I'm explaining it, it's the organization side, it's the community side, whatever we're talking about, that is what it is about. So just doing your best to control your own emotions is really going to help these conversations.
Right. And I appreciate that too. And I think the other thing that seems to be really effective, really supporting some of the things that you talked about, it's not about me, it's about that person. And one of the things our CEO, Mark Moore at Bank 59 really emphasizes, especially for those who are working directly with customers. So we've got our tellers and we have our branch managers, and someone may be very angry, be very upset, but we don't know what just happened to them before they came in. We don't know their life circumstances. I mean, maybe they're faced with the worst possible situation. And obviously, we're just dealing with a sliver of their time, and they've just received bad news or whatever the case might be. And, one of the things I try to convey is we're getting paid for the work that we do. And unfortunately, sometimes that comes with having to deal with difficult people. But then if we can think about, okay, maybe this person just had some really bad news delivered, or maybe this person's child is really struggling in school and they just lost it and they needed to get out of the house. And so it's okay to make those stories up in our mind as long as they're good stories about why this person might be the way that they are. I used that the other day when I was driving down the road and somebody cut me off. And, at first I said, oh my gosh, Anne, how many times have you done that to someone because you were distracted or you were thinking, you've been a bad driver probably more than that person has. Or, maybe the person is on their way to the hospital or whatever the case might be. If the stories we make up in our minds can be somewhat an excuse to some of the behaviors as well, I don't recommend that generally in life, but in times of having to deal with conflict, especially with customers, it can make things go a whole lot easier. Because let's face it, sometimes when we're angry and upset, and I have found myself, even working with my team, I've come into the office and said, you guys, I just need to prepare you. I'm a little crabby today. And here's why. My son just had an issue at school and I'm expecting a call from the principal. What do? They automatically cut some slack, right? So again, customers are not likely going to reveal what exactly is happening. And maybe 10% of people are just in general, they're in life unhappy and they're cranky and they want to make everybody miserable around them. Well, so be it. That's probably a small percentage of people. So just another strategy. I don't know how you feel about that too, Jessica.
Absolutely. And I think I think a lot of people did that before. It's even more important dealing with the pandemic. I mean, people, especially in the beginning, we had that lockdown. Kids weren't in school. People were trying to keep working. Me personally, I was working from home and I have 4 children under the age of 9. So to try to manage that and their schoolwork, I was very easily able to empathize. But that adds a whole new level of stress. I look back on it now and it was probably the most stressful period of my life, just trying to balance all that. And so trying to understand that people are dealing with that too. Some of our older members have not seen their grandchildren in over 8 months. That is a huge frustration. Emotionally, they feel isolated, they need that connection, and they just haven't been able to get it. And sometimes they need to get that frustration out there. I can't even explain to you how many, and not all people are huggers, but there are so many people out there that were frustrated. And I just said, can I give you a hug? And that was all they needed. Like they just needed that personal connection. Again, the why is a little bit different of an organization. That's kind of the business that we're in. But understanding,
if you're like, come on in.
I'm like, bring it in. You need a hug, I'll give you one. And I think that's a piece of it too. You have to understand people are having those. So I think that's a great strategy to use. And then giving people choices, like so much of our control has been taken away throughout this pandemic. So even if you can give them little tidbits of choices. So if we need to get off the floor and talk somewhere, would you like to go to a big room and talk, or would you like to go to a smaller, more private room? It sounds like something so minuscule, but just giving them a choice to be the person that has control of that decision sometimes calms them down as well. So just finding those little things that you can do to help them kind of get over that and just soften the blow a little bit. Sometimes that's all that needs to happen to turn that conversation in a different direction.
I think that is so key. And I never, to be honest, have never really thought about that, allowing someone to have a bit of control over the situation, and something as simple as, can I get you a cup of coffee? Or like you said, would you like to talk in the big conference room or a more private room? During pandemic, I'm going to say the big conference room, stay apart from somebody.
True.
But under other circumstances, but again, can I get you a cup of coffee? Or, would you like to stand or would you like to sit? The other part around conflict management is somewhat mirroring the behaviors. So if I'm sitting behind a desk and someone is standing over me and talking at me, it might be best just to stand up then. And then, again, keeping the open, non-threatening types of moves, but mirroring some of those behaviors. Or would you like to stand or would you like to sit? I think that's an excellent point. And in fact, I'm going to steal that and use that in the presentations I deliver. So with that, Jessica, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the group before we transition to some final remarks that we have in announcements?
I would say no. The big thing is just, again, watching your emotion, knowing it's not about you. And then I guess I will say as a closing thought is you can practice these strategies, and a lot of us probably do them naturally without even thinking it. You need to make sure that you do these in front of your staff. A lot of people learn better by watching someone else do it and then doing it themselves. Every opportunity I have where I can just be there to support my staff and have them be the one to actually manage through that conflict gives them that much more confidence. Sometimes it's a matter of, I know you are going to get this question. Here are 3 different ways that you can respond. Pick the one that is most comfortable for you. Because sometimes they know what the rule is. They don't know what to say, or, well, what if someone says this? Then what should I say? And just giving them those tools on the front end so that they're not, that's when they get panicky and emotional, is when they feel like they've been attacked and they don't have an answer. So trying to prepare them ahead of time and give them those answers ahead of time really helps them navigate that conflict on the front end. So just making sure that you can prepare them as best as possible, knowing that you're going to have to deal with a lot of it as well if they can't manage it. But just that they feel mentally prepared, like they have enough to say, helps them a lot. Make sure that you're modeling that behavior.
I think that's a great point. That whole role-playing scenario is a great way to prepare. And I know it can make people uncomfortable initially, but if you can have some fun with it as a team and have the team rotate to go, you get to be the angry customer now. And then you can, as a leader, prepare little scripts in advance that you're going to be the angry one who backs off, and you're going to be the angry one who just comes on full force. And then you're going to be the one who starts crying. How do you handle those situations? And when you can't say, bring it in for a hug, how do you handle someone who's crying? So lots of different ways. And again, it just goes back to preparation is really the key to success in life in general and all the things that we've talked about. So Jessica, I'd like to extend a sincere thank you for spending the time with us today. You've offered some incredibly valuable strategies, and obviously you're in a very difficult position and role that you have. And I can't imagine your life being at home with 4 little ones under the age of 9. My heart goes out to you that way, but I know there's a lot of people and in similar situations. So again, if we can make up that story that someone's had a difficult period in their life right now, it might make it easier for us to deal with this conflict. So thank you again. And let's everybody give a virtual round of applause to Jessica, even though
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'd like to transition into some announcements. We obviously all know the events surrounding the last several months have been unprecedented, and we obviously are continuing to be impacted by COVID-19. I want to emphasize that during this time, the Chamber has remained committed to supporting local businesses, really working hard to bring you relevant information and resources to navigate through this time. And hopefully this was yet another example of that today. Our board of directors, our committees, and our chamber staff, a special shout out to Sherry and Chris, who work tirelessly to bring you these programs and offerings. We are really dedicated towards helping all of you. And we know that as we've continued through this, we've designated a special 3-part series to help our businesses and employees learn more about our services, tools, and resources that can help all of you during this time. And with that, our 3rd webinar is coming up in 3 weeks on December 2nd, and we have 2 incredible speakers lined up. Bridget Wilder has a Bachelor of Science degree with an emphasis on dietetics and psychology. She's a dietitian, author, motivational speaker, and has been interviewed on major news shows, including Positively Milwaukee. She will share the concepts of nutrition and psychology and share tips about how we can improve our overall health outcomes. And obviously not just with a pandemic, but now we're also dealing with the fact that we're approaching holiday season. And so I think she's going to have a powerful impact in talking about it from two fronts, about how many of us, and I'm not an exception to that, find wonderful escapes and comfort in food and in beverages. But now we also have the holidays on top of it. So I think really good to hear from this expert. And then we also have Nick Seiske, who has a bachelor's degree in kinesiology and has over 15 years of experience in the health and fitness industry. He's the co-owner of Gym Lee and a CrossFit Rokius. He's really passionate about helping people achieve their own fitness goals, even if they're just starting out, and is going to share strategies to help all of us improve our overall physical well-being. So I want you to check out the Business Education Fall Series under the events section of the Chamber's website for more details and to register. And believe it or not, the Business Education Committee is already at work planning for next year's offerings, and we need your help. We're going to be sending out a short survey to ask for your feedback as to the educational topics and formats for delivery. And the survey should take no more than 30 seconds. Like, why not do that? How long does it take us just to take a look at Facebook? It takes us about 5 or 10 minutes. So make sure to fill out that survey because we want to deliver the programs that are important to you. And finally, I want to remind everyone of our upcoming virtual awards. We are seeking nominations for small and large business, nonprofit business or organization, woman in business leadership, and citizen of the year. So think of a deserving person, business, or nonprofit that should be recognized, especially this year, and nominate them for an award. That too will not take much time at all. So you can find more information about that on our Chamber's website. And last but not least, I would like to, on behalf of the Chamber, on behalf of Sherry, on behalf of Chris, and the entire Chamber Board of Directors, a very special thank you to our veterans on this very special day. I get a little emotional thinking about all of the impact that you've had in protecting our country and protecting all of us, and serving and giving of your life to help everyone else who needs it in this country. So a sincere thank you. I hope you find a special way to really thank yourself today, and know that we are here supporting you every step of the way. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who has participated in this webinar today. And I really wish you a great rest of the day, a great week, and be well, everyone.